Ivy here. Today's podcast looks at how the royal family and royalists have handled Harry and Meghan moving to the USA, stepping back from senior royal duties and starting a new life. To do this, I am using an academic model. As you know, I like to use models that have been used in research. It's a very useful way of explaining and also showing in terms of imagery the sort of deeper elements of what's being discussed. So I'm using the Kubler-Ross model, 7 stages of grief, which is also used in breakup of relationships. There are a number of models out there that range between 5 and 7 stages, but in general they pretty much all cover the same headings. Slightly different order here and there, but they cover the same topics. So, with each of these stages, I will give examples of what occurred around the Sussexes and the royal family and royal reporters and all the carnival of experts, all of them. And I shall go through each stage, and I will cover from November 2019, when Harry and Meghan took a 6-week break from all the mayhem and vitriol and came back in the new year and announced that they were stepping back. So from November 2019 up until the end of 2020, I have used that model and given examples for each stage. I have used the model again for the period January 2021 up until September this year, but I will be adding to it over the next 3 months, and it will take us up to the end of the year, and then I will pull something together in January 2022. What I've done is, as I said, look at how they've handled sort of giving up their star person from the royal family. But I've also done a lot of work in pulling together all the success that Sussexes have had. And so I've done stages of Sussex success. And I hope you enjoy that. It's all things that we know, but it's just nice to see them all listed in one place. And then, to round off this podcast, I then took a look back at the 15 episodes that I've done so far for Sussex Global UK and taken all of the titles, listed them in order, and then I looked for themes that emerged from those 15. And although it wasn't intentional, there were clearly things that I thought needed to be discussed, but when I looked at the clusters, there were groups of podcasts that looked at group activity, different groups against Harry and Meghan. There is another cluster that came out that related to a range of mental health topics based on and because of that group activity. There is another section that really contains all of the legal, not all of, but I certainly have touched upon legal implications in my mind that are overdue for action. So each of those clusters were pretty much weighed the same. They came out more or less with a similar percentage. So group activity, mental health issues and the range that covers, and legal action that is overdue. And then the 2 that were remaining from the 15, when I looked at the headings, they were basically the conclusion, if you like. So we'll see when I go through all the list at the end why I smiled when those 2 were left, because they really did fall into the conclusion, asking the right questions, and it made me smile. So hopefully I'll do the same for you. So let's start off. 7 stages of grief. The first one is shock. People sort of not able to believe that this has happened, whether that be, as I said, a bereavement, whether it be a breakdown of a marriage, of a relationship. It's initial shock. Next stage is denial. They can't believe that it happened. How did it happen? Is it real? No, something has gone wrong here. We can fix this. So it's denial. So it goes from shock to denial. Next stage is anger. This is where the emotions take over. How dare you leave me? How dare you die? All sorts of things that are not necessarily rational, but they come out. It's the anger. You're left behind. You don't know how to move forward. Why? How has this happened? Then there's the bargaining stage. The bargaining stage is when they try and reach an arrangement with the other person or whoever it is, whether it be, as I said, a relationship breakdown, or in this case, people stepping back from senior role duties. So they start to bargain and barter for their time, and however they want to describe that, that's what they're doing in the background. They're trying to persuade them to stay or to have some kind of compromise. Next stage is depression. Depression sets in when any of the above hasn't worked. Testing the water is, again, sort of sitting back and trying to think, what else can be done? What else can we do to change this? And then the last stage is when you accept that it's happened, you can't do anything about it, and you have to move forward. Now, the people behind this model and similar models will tell you that no one person, no family, no group goes through these 7 stages in that order necessarily. You will be up and down that ladder, if you like. So one moment you might sort of take 2 steps forward, something will happen, and you'll go back a stage. What researchers have said, and they all agree on, if people miss out any of those sections and think that they've got to the end and everything is all right, without fail, when that arrangement comes a cropper, the wheel comes off somewhere, when people explore deeper as to the process they went through, they realise that they missed out 1 or more sections. So, in effect, whether or not you do them in that order, the emotional, if you like, journey has to be that you cover all those points at some stage. Otherwise, you will never reach the point of acceptance and planning for a future without that individual or people in your life. So, hopefully, if my software knowledge that I've been working on today works while I'm going through this podcast, you will currently see a diagram of the 7 stages of grief on your screen. If not, it's in the article. So let's move on to the next stage. So, stage 1, denial, desperate for answers. This is from November 2019. This was a nonsense period. Royal family, lots of activity regarding Christmas photos. Usually there's just 1 Christmas photo each year. The royal family were waiting to see if the Sussexes would publish a photo. Remember, they were away, and they said they'd be away for about 6 weeks. No one knew what they were planning in terms of Christmas 2019 because, as I said, they're out of the country, taking a much-needed break from the vitriol. We found out soon afterwards it was because they were taking time to finalise their exit from the UK. The Cambridges released a few photos over the lead-up to Christmas, and also there was footage of the Queen, Prince Charles and Prince William and George apparently baking something for Christmas. The Queen was helping George while still holding her handbag. Everything looked so realistic in their kitchen. Nothing was heard from the Sussexes, despite all of this frenetic activity by the rest of the royal family, obviously looking out each day for something from the Sussexes. not exactly ignoring Harry and Meghan, as they promised they would do. Sussexes released a photo on New Year's Day of Harry and Archie, and the photo went globally viral. It ended up making the royal family look rather foolish and desperate, with multiple photos throughout November and December to no avail. It was never clear which one was meant to be the Xmas photo of the Cambridges. Royal family claimed to be blindsided by the Sussexes' announcement about stepping back in January. This is not true. Discussions had been going on for months, prolonging the process unnecessarily for Harry and Meghan, it seems. Harry and Meghan, forced by a story being leaked by a tabloid newspaper, the Duke of Sussex issued a statement on the 8th of January 2020 relating to stepping back from senior royal duties and to become financially independent of the royal family commencing in the new financial year. Stage 2 really did kick in, anger and denial. Lots of posturing by the media and apparently courtiers. Definite signs of anger about the announcement and the planned departure. The plan by the British royal family and royal reporters backfired, it would seem. None of them thought that the whole Sussex family would leave. How could they do this? Royal reporters and media kept claiming, "We have been fair to them. What will happen to Sussex Royal Foundation?" The anger with the Sussexes leaving at the Commonwealth Service in March 2020 was plain to see. The global audience witnessed this unprofessional, disgusting behaviour. Moving on to sadness and bargaining. Over the previous 6 months, it had been clear that the monarchy, no matter how much the media try to spin it differently, does not have the resources and the calibre of personnel to function as well as they could without Harry and Meghan present. The latest round of blackmail tactics, disguised as bargaining, attempted to offer the part-time model the Sussexes offered in January 2020, and which was refused. Now, all of a sudden, it is back on the table, but with emphasis on Harry returning to help out Prince Charles and the Cambridges. No mention of Meghan in this request to return. Next stage, jealousy and competitiveness. Jealousy has been at the heart of this issue since the Oceanic tour. The foundation of the media coverage in 2016 to 18 was grounded in racism and the resentment of the powerhouse that was clearly the new couple on the block. By the time the Oceanic tour came around, when international interest rose with speed, it was clear that before the plane landed back in the UK, fragile egos within the monarchy had started to work on a strategy to stop this movement before it gained any further traction. This was demonstrated in the tone of the media coverage once they were back on UK turf. International coverage had been positive, so it was hard for the UK media to be out of sync with global coverage by others. This jealousy and competition still lives today in stories about whose house is bigger, who really calls the shots in the Sussex commercial ventures, etc. Apathy is the next stage. The apathy officially expressed by UK media, in particular the Royal Rota Group, i.e. the Sussexes are irrelevant and they are not marketable, was always false. It was stated so many times in articles that the stance itself became comedic and highlighted that they in fact felt the complete opposite. Clear that the plan was to try and ensure that the Sussexes were seen to fail and or be considered too hot to handle by groups and organisations in respect of future projects. It was obvious that they were convinced that Sussexes would return to the abusive environment of the UK rather than struggle outside of the bubble that they knew, particularly Harry. Acceptance. Abusers never enjoy outcomes that they have had no control over. Abusers enjoy their perceived power and control. The latest stance is to accept that the Sussexes are moving on to new territory, but the family is still trying to give the impression to the public that they are very much still in control. During this period, the family were trying to scatter their presence into Sussex business affairs like confetti, pretending that they could access all documentation and dispute and remove any part of it. They were deluded. The legal agreements were done by the time they were announced. The royal family have no jurisdiction in such matters outside of the UK. The roles have reversed. The Sussexes have moved from being as described as irrelevant by the media to the media now moving to justify why they will continue to report on them and their activities because of public interest, as Harry is a son of the future king. What a sad excuse after all the fuss they made about being irrelevant. One wonders why we don't see them report ad nauseum about the current monarch's children. Next stage, hope, moving on. They were definitely not there then, and I don't really think they're in that state of mind now. But going back to the first half of this discussion, it will be interesting to see the juxtaposition of how the monarchy manages their self-inflicted wound going forward, as the Sussexes clearly move on with their lives. The amount of time and effort already being taken to control how the Sussexes operate outside of the family, even though they have absolutely no financial ties to the public purse or funding from Prince Charles, is the clearest indicator yet that the firm is not ready to move on. Let's have a look at the model in respect of January 2020 up until September 2020, and 21, sorry. And as I said, let's move on to January 21 to September 21, using the same categories of the model. So, in terms of stage 1, denial, desperate for answers. No longer in denial now, strategy clearly moved on to Operation Destroy the Sussexes by any means possible, i.e. try to destroy their credibility as business partners, destroy their characters if at all possible. Anger. New life. Put barriers in the way. Continue to try and exert control and try to give the impression that the royal family need input into their business contracts. Once again, the royal family are reminded that they have no control of business networks, the size and power of the organisations that Meghan and Harry are now signing deals with. UK has now moved to attempting to destroy the character of Harry and Meghan with the aim of trying to deter businesses from working with them due to these attempts at character assassination. In terms of the sadness and bargaining, the royal family continue to employ, via a range of people, usually the royal rota, emotional blackmail, because they realise that they do need Harry, but they still refuse to acknowledge Meghan. Sadness that the future king and future queen consort and the future king and the future queen consort are not popular enough for people to care about the monarchy. Realise that Harry is needed until the Cambridge children are adults. Jealousy and competitiveness. Literally, any event or news of any activity concerning Harry and Meghan, which always garners global interest, the two future kings come out like clockwork to perform for the nation, just so that their propaganda team in the Royal Rota write and show lots of photos from these dead behind the eyes people, trying to play a game that they have no understanding or the competency to deliver, and zero charismatic appeal. So ultimately, each time they do this, it is like poor quality comedians performing in some low-grade venue somewhere. The phrase of, "you cannot compete where you do not compare," comes to mind each time they bring this low-grade pantomime to media eyes. Apathy and anger. The hit pieces on Meghan continued. Daily Mail lost their court case against Meghan in March 2020. The hit pieces on Meghan continued. Daily Mail lost its court case against Meghan in March 2021. The Daily Mail have appealed, and it is due to be heard in court in October-November this year, 2021. Media coverage on Harry and Meghan continues to be way above the time spent on the others in the royal family combined, even though it is all second-hand news from the USA, because the royal reporters no longer have direct access to the Sussexes. Every time they write articles about Harry and Meghan, they devalue the future king and the future king, leading to the very thing they were meant to be avoiding, i.e. obsolescence. Acceptance. According to all the Royal Rota, there is no problem relating to royal popularity, and the royal family do not need the Sussexes to be globally adored, as they announced in the spring of 2020. The new Fab Four version 1, William and Kate and Edward and Sophie. Version 2 was William and Kate and Charles and Camilla. Despite the statement repeated for the last 10 years that Kate has now found her voice, none of these versions of the Fab Four have worked. Nearly 12 months later, I think we're on Fab version 1003. Who knows? Not sure that the British royal family are willing to admit that the next two people destined to be king are simply not popular, and at least one of them possesses no leadership skills, with both having alienated many people of the Commonwealth and most of the younger generation. Kate has taken to copying Meghan in terms of colours and styles of outfits, having spent many years copying her late mother-in-law's clothing styles. It seems someone has advised that the way to attract the younger members of the population is to dress like Meghan. Lots of receipts exist of Kate doing this, and when photos are placed side by side, it makes it even more pitiful. Following in the footsteps of emulating the background of their Zoom calls to match those of Harry and Meghan, including footage taken from outside of their home in LA, the Cambridges even including a bench, albeit an obvious brand new bench, which made it even more pitiful. Hope. I see no evidence of hope, only desperation of a PR team out of ideas, and still using a playbook decades out of date. There is an exercise currently underway of returning to old online articles and amending them to contain less critique and criticism of Meghan. These people seem to forget that nothing is erased from the internet, and receipts exist in abundance around the world of the old and the new articles. Sure, they will come in handy when the establishment decide to bring these into the public domain again, because there is no doubt that there is some kind of anticipated action coming up where the UK media want to try and rewrite history. They will not succeed. Receipts exist. There is quite a detailed section on Sussex success. I'm just going to go through a few of the headings here, but there will be some things on your screen, as I said, if my software works and I've learned correctly how to use it. But apart from that, there is a PowerPoint presentation that will be included in the article, a link to it, and you'll be able to go through it in detail. But just going through a summary to remind you of how well Harry and Meghan are doing and have done since the day that they escaped. So, we'll start off. They escaped a plantation. Tyler Perry provided a home and security. Then there was the Netflix contract. Repaid all supposed Frogmore Cottage costs and rent in advance up until March 2022. Hired their own security team. In your face, Prince Charles. Purchased a home for the Sussex family. Spotify contract. Formation of Archewell, comprising of Archewell Foundation, Archewell Audio, Archewell Productions. Archewell Foundation working with the Aspen Institute, Centre for Humane Technology, Global Citizen, UCLA Centre for Critical Internet Inquiry, World Central Kitchen, Compassion in Action, supporting organisations with grants. Recipients include Girls Inc., Genesis, Harvest Home, Loveland Foundation, Mind, National Women's Law Centre, Presspad, URL Media. Archewell Audio, working with Spotify, to spotlight diverse perspectives and voices. Podcasts, shows that build community through shared experiences, powerful narrative and universal values. Archewell Productions, working with Netflix, Heart of Invictus docu-series, and Pearl, animated series adventure of a 12-year-old girl inspired by influential women in history. This is just the beginning. This dynamo duo are just getting started. So, to summarise this episode, as I said, we've explored the stages of grief by the British royal family and UK media using the Kubler-Ross model from November 2019 to September 2021. Also outline the successes achieved by Harry and Meghan since stepping back from senior royal duties. And there is a collation of themes emerging from the 15 Sussex Global UK podcasts produced prior to the celebratory episode. There is a chart which you will see in the article, but just as a reminder, I'm going to go through each episode by number and title and tell you where the clusters appear, under what heading, whether it be legal, group activity, mental health issues. Episode 1. Stop clinging to the Sussex wave. That is one of the two that I've regarded as a conclusion to this podcast. Because when you go through all of the information that we've been discussing today, you end up with two questions, or at least two sections, one of which is a question, and it's about, now that Harry and Meghan are so successful, there is an element of certain factions trying to hang on and ride the wave with the Sussexes. Yeah, it's not going to work. So, episode 1, Stop Clinging to the Sussex Wave, part of the conclusion. Episode 2, Meghan, Working Royal or Slave, a podcast I first did with Meghanpedia earlier this year, and I repeated it as part of Sussex Global. That comes under the cluster of legal. Episode 3, Human Rights, Protection Under the Law, another legal. Episode 4, Herd Mentality, Are We Programmed? That's listed under groups. Episode 5, Stages of Leaving an Abusive Relationship. That comes under mental health. Episode 6, Coercive Control. And a note that California passed a bill in September 2020 in relation to its citizens with support and a legal process around coercive control. So as you would imagine, that comes under legal. Episode 7, Welcome to the Hunger Games. That came under groups. Episode 8, Who's Sorry Now? That's my second one in the conclusion section. Episode 9, UK British Royal Family, Government, Propaganda Failing, Groups. Episode 10, Psychology of Jealousy and Envy, Mental Health. Episode 11, Let Go of Toxic People in Your Life, Set Boundaries, Mental Health. Episode 12, Who Will Be the Next Whipping Boy or Girl, Groups. Episode 13, Response from a Freed Slave to a Former Master's Letter, Mental Health. Episode 14, Hereditary Monarchy, Can It Work in a Modern Society, Legal. 15, Collective Narcissism, and it comes under groups. So, to summarise, 4 podcasts related to the various groups who abused the Sussexes, Meghan in particular. 4 podcasts relating to the impact of that group activity, which led to a range of mental health implications. 4 podcasts relate to the huge red flags for legal implications and interventions which are well overdue. The remaining 2 podcasts on this list unintentionally form an accurate conclusion to all of this disgusting behaviour by UK Monarchy and Associates, and they were Stop Clinging to the Sussex Wave and Who's Sorry Now. That's the end of today's podcast. You will find in the article, as well as hopefully some of them appear on this presentation, there are 3 PowerPoints. There is a very long, detailed Word document, and there are a couple of charts here or there together with references. So hopefully you found this useful. As I said, I will update the remaining podcasts for this year and then do an exercise in January about the last 2 years and also the 4 years before, or 3 to 4 years before, of how the Sussexes were treated. And we will have 5 years really plus of data. So hopefully you enjoyed this. Speak to you soon. Bye for now. Bye.